Hello there, and thanks for joining me. I'm digital artist Aaron Rutten, and in this video, we're going to draw a Ninja Turtle using Photoshop. I'll start by creating a new layer down at the bottom of the Layers palette by clicking on the new layer icon, and I'll call that new layer Sketch. This is going to be a layer for our sketch. Next, I'll turn on Symmetry Painting up here at the top in the Properties. I can click the little butterfly icon, and then I can choose New Vertical Symmetry. That'll put a vertical symmetry plane on my canvas. If you're not able to see this butterfly symmetry icon, you need to go to Edit Preferences, and then Technology Previews, and then you need to enable Paint Symmetry. Next, I'll select the Brush tool, and I'll choose the Hard Brush preset. This is just your standard brush. In order to get a natural looking line, we want to turn on pen pressure for our tablet. So if you're not seeing a thick and thin line when you press down lighter or harder, go ahead and click this little icon up here to turn on pen pressure. And now you should be able to get a thick and thin line like so. I can resize my brush using the left and right bracket keys to make it thicker or thinner. And if I hold Shift, I can draw straight lines. What I want to do is draw a square here, and this is going to represent the outer boundary of the head. Next, I want to divide that square in half, but I want the bottom half to be bigger than the top half. And the top part of the head is not as wide as the bottom, so drawing this line on the left and the right helps me estimate the top part of the head, which I'll indicate with an oval here. Then I'll overlap that oval with a bigger oval for the mouth part of the head. And then right where this horizontal line separates the top and bottom halves, that's where we'll draw an arc for our nose. Then we'll draw some eyes that are kind of overlapped by that arc. And then beneath that, a little bit below centered, we'll draw kind of a smooth, stretched out M shape for the mouth. We'll go ahead and draw the side of the teeth here. We'll have the lip kind of curve up and get overlapped by the upper lip. So kind of the opposite shape that you drew, just flipped upside down. We can indicate the eyebrows, which will raise up above the bandana a little bit. We'll draw the bandana line, which curves around and wraps around the head. You want to make sure that the bandana is in perspective, so it curves downward. Now I'll go ahead and select the eraser, and I'll just clean up some of these extra lines that we don't need, such as the lines on the eyes here. This will help me to focus more on what I actually want to keep. Now I'll switch back to my brush by hitting B on my keyboard, and I'll draw a line that curves down, and that'll be for the teeth. I'll draw in some little V shapes here that'll be in between the teeth where the gums are, and I'll draw vertical lines that kind of connect those little triangle shapes. Now we have an indication of our teeth. Now at this point we're done with symmetry for the most part, so we can click on the butterfly icon and turn symmetry off. I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to draw a horizontal line that will represent the top of my pupils here. That'll help me keep them the same height, and I'll just sketch those in. And then I'll just kind of reshape the eyes so that they're not completely symmetrical. One can be maybe more raised than the other one. That way they're not exactly the same, and there's kind of more of an asymmetrical expression on the face. Same goes for the eyebrow. I can make the eyebrow thicker or thinner on one of the eyes. And then I'll just erase that horizontal guide since I don't need that anymore. And I'll just clean up the eyes. Next, we'll sketch in the bandana. You can choose whichever side you like. I'm going to choose the right side here, and we'll just put a little knot by drawing a circle. And then coming out of that knot, we'll have some bunny ear or leaf shapes that kind of stick out of that. Next, we'll want to refine the shape of the head and give our turtle a chin. So draw kind of that same smooth, wide M shape that you did for the mouth, for the bottom of the chin there. That way it looks like the turtle has a chin, and then it turns into cheeks as it goes around to the side of the head. So I think that'll do for our rough sketch. Let's go ahead and reduce the opacity of that sketch, and we'll draw on top of it using cleaner lines, and we'll make this look more like a finished drawing. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call that layer Ink, and then I'm going to select the brush tool again. This time I'm going to add some smoothing. You can find the amount that you like. Somewhere around 50 is going to work for me. And I'll just very carefully draw on these lines. If you're having trouble going from one direction, switch to the other side and draw it. And sometimes that side will work better. You can also segment your lines. You don't have to do one solid smooth line if you don't want to. I'm just very carefully going through here and just inking this and trying to make it look very nice and clean and polished. I don't have to follow my sketch exactly. If I see somewhere where it needs to be corrected, I'll go ahead and correct it. If I left out anything, I can go ahead and draw that in. And at any time, you can go back to your sketch and refine your sketch separately from your ink lines here. So feel free to do that if you need to. Don't be afraid to use undos. I want the eyes to be overlapped by the nose, so I'll make sure that they go kind of behind it. Now this smoothing setting helps you draw smoother lines by making your strokes a little bit slower, so you may find that in some cases it can be a little more difficult to draw with. So if that's the trouble, then you want to lower your smoothing to a lower setting. That'll make it much easier to draw, and it might feel a little more natural. So there may be some things like these circles for the eyes that I'll want to draw without smoothing or with very little smoothing. These little details on the mouth will also be a lot easier to draw without too much smoothing. So I'll just draw those in. I'm just indicating the little gaps between the teeth here. You don't have to separate every single tooth if you don't want to, but that's a stylistic choice. Now at this point, we don't need our sketch layer anymore, so we can go ahead and just delete that layer. And now we can start adding some layers of color, but we'll want to add those on separate layers that are beneath our ink layer. That way, if we want to change the colors, it'll be a lot easier later. So I'll create a new layer beneath my ink. I'll go ahead and select the paint bucket, which is hiding under the gradient tool. I want to go ahead and turn on all layers up here in the properties at the top. I'll go ahead and pick a green color for my skin, and I'll go ahead and just fill in at the top of the head by clicking right there in the center, and then on the bottom of the head to fill in that. Now what that's done is that's put that paint on a new layer, but it's also kept it within my lines, which is kind of the best of both worlds. I'll go ahead and create another new layer for a different color. We can choose kind of a light blue color like this for the eyes. We'll go ahead and make sure the paint bucket is selected. And we'll fill in the eyes. Now those might end up being white later, as well as the teeth, but right now we want to fill them in with something other than white so that we can see that they're filled in against that white background. I switched to the brush and I colored in any little gaps that the paint bucket didn't get. Now I'm going to go ahead and create another new layer, and I'm going to call this bandana. And Raphael was always my favorite Ninja Turtle, so I'm going to select red here, and I'm going to go ahead and select the paint bucket, and I'm going to fill in the bandana with that red color. If the paint bucket leaves a few gaps here and there, just switch to your brush with B and just paint over those gaps. Now, as I mentioned earlier, having our color on separate layers will make it easier to change the colors. For example, we could go to Layer Effects down in the bottom of the Layers palette, and then choose a color overlay, and that'll let us change the color of the eyes from that light blue to the white. We can do that with any of our layers if we're not absolutely happy with those colors we chose. Now I'm going to go back to the ink layer, and I'm going to add just a few more details just to help this look a little more detailed and have a little bit more character to it. I'll put a few spots here and there on the skin, and I'll add some lines for hatching in areas where I think there might be a little bit of shadow, such as near the bottom edge of the bandana. These little lines help the bandana look more three-dimensional, and these little details that you add help the Ninja Turtle to look more like your Ninja Turtle rather than someone else's. Now I'm going to return to the bandana color layer, and I'm going to lock the transparency of that layer. Then I will choose a color that is a bit darker than my base color. We'll use that to draw in some shading here on the bandana. Now with the transparency locked, it's going to keep me from painting outside of that bandana shape, so I won't be able to paint on the white background accidentally. This makes it really quick and easy to go in and fill in your artwork and add shading without having to worry about messing anything up. So I'll go ahead and make my bandana look more three-dimensional. The light in our drawing is going to be coming from the top right, so I'll have all my shadows on the bottom and left side of all of my three-dimensional objects. I want to think about the contour of my eyes because they're wrapping around a three-dimensional face. It's not just a flat bandana. Now I'll follow that same process on the skin layer as well. I'll select the skin layer. I'll go ahead and sample my base color, make it brighter, and then I can paint in, but I need to remember to lock the transparency of that layer. I didn't remember to do that here, so I'm painting right now without the transparency locked. But fortunately, I'm not going over the edge. If I were to go over the edge here while I'm shading, then that color would end up on the background. That wouldn't look good, and then I'd have to go in and erase it and clean it up. Now, if you watch over on the left side of the head, I'm going to make a line, and there it goes. It went off of my turtle, and I had to undo it. So I need to lock that transparency, and now I don't have to worry about painting outside of the turtle shape. Now let's go ahead and shade the eyes. That'll help those look more three-dimensional. Now this particular layer has a color overlay implied, so before I'll be able to shade it, I actually need to go to rasterize layer. Otherwise, it's going to put the color overlay over any color that I put down. And now I'll be able to go in and add that shading with a lighter blue color. I'm going to go ahead and create another new layer. This time it's going to be above the ink. I'll select white, and I'll go ahead and call this layer highlight. This is going to be highlights for the eyes, and I'll just draw those in on the top right. That's the direction the light is coming in, and that helps the eyes look more lifelike. So we almost have a finished drawing, but I want to clean up a couple mistakes here. I can see that the paint bucket didn't fill in those corners of the bandana, so I'll switch to the bandana layer, sample that original color I was using, and just paint that in with the brush to fix those edges. Then I'll go ahead and group all of those layers together, holding Shift and selecting all the layers, and then I'll hit Control-G to group them. I'll call that group Raph. Then I'll go ahead and hit Control-T to free transform, and if I need to make my head wider or taller, I can do that to correct the proportions. I think how I had it was pretty good, so I'll just go ahead and leave it like that. can hit Enter to apply that transformation. Then I'll go to Edit, Transform, and then Distort, and I can drag these little corner points to distort the head. Distorting it will help it look a little less symmetrical. It's up to you if you want to do this. This is kind of optional, but I think that helps this piece. It looks a little bit better. And there you go. We have a finished drawing of a Ninja Turtle. If you enjoyed this tutorial, take a quick second to click the like button. And if you're new to my channel, I'd love to have you subscribe. I have a lot more videos for digital artists like you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.